to play games until 2:30 in the morning. Quietly, I was praying, help me, help me, help me. And even more when the alarm went off the next morning that it was time to make breakfast and eat breakfast. But mostly what I prayed was, thank you, thank you, thank you for the gift of these amazing high schoolers, and for the gift of being together, and for the gift of the leadership of our Children and Youth Ministries Coordinator, Kyler Vogt. It was truly a privilege to watch him at work with our young folks as we went up to Mount Hood and spent time in Hood River. I was particularly struck in my tired stupor after breakfast when Kyler gathered us all together in the living room for an amazing teaching segment that he laid out. But then after that, to remind us, now, some of you all made choices last night that might result in you being a little tired today. And when we get tired, oftentimes we get grumpy and irritable. But today, we are going to have fun, and we are going to be kind and considerate to one another, just as we have the whole time. And one of the best ways that we can do that, he said, is to simply say, please and thank you. His encouragement to the youth was also an invitation into that spiritual practice for me. As we continued on with our day, heading over to Hood River and waiting about an hour to have lunch, finally there came a time after lunch when Kyler and the kids wanted to go to a game shop, and I saw my opportunity to go and sit in a coffee shop with coffee. As I walked into the coffee shop, there were 3 people in line ahead of me, and there were 2 people who were working, making coffees. At a certain point, I saw one of them look up over my shoulder, one of the baristas, with a feeling of fear on her face. As I turned behind me, there were 8 more people coming in and just the 2 workers. All of us looking forward to our coffee. I got to the front of the line and ordered my coffee and chocolate chip cookie, and as she handed me the cookie, I said thank you, but she was in such a rush I wasn't sure that she had heard me, and with Kyler's encouragement about the importance of the practice of gratitude, I said it again as she came back and slid it further across the counter to me, and I said, thank you. And she looked up, paused for a moment, caught my eyes, and said, you're welcome. And we smiled at one another. I noticed how good it felt. On this particular day, according to the Gospel of Luke, Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, but he was on his way passing through this region between Samaria and Galilee, the region between his people and the people his people really, really did not like. As he entered a village, 10 men with leprosy approached him. Due to this awful skin disease, these men were among the untouchable class. Regardless of whether they were of Jesus' people or some other people, nobody could touch these folks with this skin disease. And they were labeled unclean as a way of trying to protect the rest of the village from their disease. They were forced, like all people with this condition, to live outside of the town. The priests were supposed to catch this disease in its early stages and determine whether the person was unclean and required to suspend their normal relationships, as well as their economic, political, and religious and family activities indefinitely. Leviticus 13 in the Hebrew Scriptures says, the person who has the leprous disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head be disheveled. And he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall abide outside the camp. Can you imagine? These 10 men had been doing exactly what Leviticus prescribed. Now they stood there outside of the village, keeping their distance, but they dared to ask for healing. They cried out, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And as he is on his way, Jesus sends them on their way, saying, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. They were all made clean. They were all cured of the leprosy. Nobody had to embody gratitude in order to receive that healing. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, prostrated himself at Jesus' feet, and gave thanks to God. And, Luke says, and he was a Samaritan. When one of them, an outsider, allows this response of gratitude to well up and overflow, Jesus says, "Your faith has made you well." Right? They were already all cured, but he said, "Your faith has made you well." This word "well" really means wholeness, but it also means, in the Greek language, to be saved. Both. Your faith has made you well. It is a fact of the human condition that we do not always receive physical cures from the things that ail us. But through God, through the ministry of Jesus in our midst, we are assured that we can always be made whole and well, even when cure doesn't come. When we realize that God sees us and loves us now, and that God has done for us what we cannot do for ourselves, gratitude in response to that presence is the inevitable response that would well up. All of these men are healed physically. One, we are told, is made well, whole. C.S. Lewis said that he observed the connection between gratitude and personal well-being. And he said, "I noticed how the humblest and at the same time most balanced minds praised most. Praise almost seems to be inner health made audible." The humblest and most balanced minds praised most. I was blessed, like so many of you, to get to serve when we had folks who do not have stable housing here staying in our fellowship hall in September for a week as their housing for the week. And one of the things that struck me is how every one of the moms came up to me at some point while I was serving and thanked me that St. Andrew was making a space for them. One of them did so sobbing in tears that our congregation would extend that generosity. I thought, we've got this space. Nobody uses it at night. You could think that we would expect that churches would do this. But this response of gratitude was overflowing from each and every one of them. Also, when a number of us accepted the invitation from our Latinx siblings at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton to go and be a part of the Know Your Rights training that they did, and to role play with them as if we were ICE agents, asking them for their driver's license or what their name was and helping them practice their rights. Yet again, person after person came up afterwards and said, "Thank you, thank you." So here we were being mean to them, and all they could say was, "Thank you for coming to help us." Isn't it the least that we could do? Nothing in today's gospel lesson tells us that any of the men who had been afflicted with this skin condition called leprosy was in the habit of practicing gratitude as their spiritual practice, even though we know how helpful gratitude is as a spiritual practice. But one of them, the foreigner, of whom we do not even know how he came to be in that country or what his status was, gratitude from him simply welled up and overflowed. As I was sitting in that coffee shop yesterday, trying to stay awake, I was reflecting even a little more on gratitude after that experience with the barista. And at that point, one of those 8 people who were behind me happened to be a young dad, I was assuming with his first child, perhaps around 6 months old, because he was just kissing that baby. The baby was looking around, and the dad was kissing his ear, and he was kissing his cheek and bouncing the little baby, waiting for his coffee. I imagine perhaps he was equally sleep-deprived as I was. And I watched him, and I thought about the gratitude, the love, certainly, but also the gratitude he must have been feeling for the gift of that baby and how it was just welling up to overflowing. And I saw this, I imagined the sense of, well, you know, we can fall into love, but the Spirit placed it on my heart, this sense that maybe we can fall into gratitude in certain moments of life as well. At that moment, the little baby looked over at me and saw me smiling at the baby and suddenly lit up with a big smile, the baby and I having our moment, me falling into gratitude with that beautiful little baby. And then at a certain point, the dad, seeing that his little son was looking at something, looked over to see what his son was smiling at, and he saw me and smiled a big smile as we both gave thanks silently for the gift of that baby. Is that what happened for this one who returned to give thanks to Jesus? That somehow the obstacle of maybe just doing the right thing, right? Because the other 9, they were just doing what Jesus told them. He didn't say, come back and give thanks. He said, go show yourself to the priest. But this one actually disobeyed perhaps what Jesus was saying and turned around and came back, falling into gratitude, gave thanks to God in Jesus' presence. As we prepare to let God, through Jesus Christ, gather us at this table of gratitude, this table of thanksgiving again, it might be helpful to know that the Greek word used in this verse 16, where the man from Samaria is giving thanks, is the word Eucharisto. Eucharisto. It is indeed our duty to give thanks. We say it is good for us to give thanks, and it is. And even more than that, it is our joy to be able to give thanks, to let that gratitude overflow. When we gather at this table every week, perhaps we can also think about the number of cures we have received. I was thinking this week about how many cuts I've probably sustained over the course of my life. Can't see any of them anymore. None of them are bleeding. How much cure I actually have received. And yes, like many of you, I struggle with some ailments that I doubt are ever going to be cured. And the longer I go on in life, probably the more that's going to be the case. I even heard from 2 of our high schoolers who have had major surgeries and continue on with some impact as a result of those injuries or surgeries. We will not physically recover from every ailment we must endure, and sooner or later, every single one of us will die from one of them. Yet when gratitude overflows and praise and thanksgiving flow forth, Jesus affirms that we receive something more than physical cure, the restoration of social and economic possibilities. We, like the man from Samaria, can be made well. And Jesus promises that even when we are not cured, we can be well. We can and we are saved. As we prepare to gather in thanksgiving around this table, I ran across a video this week that was about gratitude. A man who has spent 30 years doing still photography, like just of flowers opening up so that he could see them. He has spent 30 years of his life. And in this TED Talk, he offered to the community an experience of gratitude through some of his own video and photography and through the voice of one of our elders in the world. And I will show this as a way of helping us prepare ourselves for the Eucharist.